Well, hello, this is Peter Combs from Bidamount.com and P.O. Combs Asian Art in Gloucester, Massachusetts. And today is July 22nd, 2020. And in this video, we're going to take a look at last week's, or actually a week and a half ago's, auctions over in Hong Kong that took place at Sotheby's and Christie's, and go through some of the results, look at some of the things that did well, some of the things that didn't sell, and talk a bit about what's happening in the market over there. Overall, the sales were quite good. As everybody knows, because we're dealing with the shutdown, and there's a lot of strife right now in Hong Kong. There's so much going on that it's always a wild card to see how these things do. I think I have to say Christie's and Sotheby's and Bonhams, all the auction houses are getting back to work, are doing a really great job under very difficult circumstances. Can you imagine running an auction, which is usually a hall's full of people and doing things, and everybody has to, social distance, and then there are currency issues happening right now over in China. There's some difficulties in getting currencies out of the mainland that are being brought to bear and so forth. But overall, things went pretty well, and we're going to take a look at the sales. And if you're interested in seeing the catalogs, because they've mostly gone offline by now, you can find them over on Bidamount.com in the black. It's basically the black drop-down menu on the homepage on the right side. You can click it; it'll bring you here, and all the catalogs are in the upper part of the bookshelf. Right now, there's over 561 auction catalogs, books, references, and so forth there. But they're pretty easy to find, and you can always search for them in the search box. Okay, if you want to go back and zoom in and read, more information about the sale. Alrighty, and the first here's the we're going to cover Christie's first, and the second part we're going to get to Sotheby's. All right, now the first thing we're going to take a look at is the important Chinese ceramics and works of art sale that happened on July 9th, which is just almost 2 weeks ago. And the first thing we're going to take a look at is this. This was that very rare Southern Sung Longquan Celadon Canuta Green vase. These are very small. This was only about 7 inches tall. We'll blow it up here and have a good look at it. These are popular in Japan to be used as tea ceremony wares. A lot of these nice early Sung pieces ended up in Japan over the years, and this was, I believe, from a Japanese collection. Beautifully done, lovely example, in a rare form. A lot of you may be scratching your head saying, I've never seen this form before. It's because there's only a few of them around. They're extremely rare, very small, and very simple elegance, which is sort of typical of Song Dynasty ceramics and other art. Very subtle. And it was estimated at 4 to 6 million Hong Kong, and it barely, I suspect it barely made the reserve. It sold for 3.725 million Hong Kong with the buyer's premium. So I have a feeling that maybe the reserve was a little higher at the beginning when this sale was taking place, and then they contacted the consignor and said maybe you want to lower your reserve a little bit if you're really serious about selling this. Unfortunately, but it did all right. I mean, it sold for 3.7 million. The exchange rate today is around $8 to the eight Hong Kong to the dollar. So divide 337 by that, and you'll come up with about what it went for, which is around. What does that come out to? About just a little under $500,000. All right. But still an interesting object, and whoever bought it probably is going to own it for quite a while, and has a great, actually, from a financial side, probably going to be a very good investment. The next thing up is this Yunlo basin. This basin had been sold previously about 5 years ago, and a lot of people were wondering how it would do. It ended up selling for 1.8 million Hong Kong, or a little over $200,000. It's a very rare form, as those of you who have seen these before. It's based on an Islamic metal form that was shared with the Chinese potters, and they turned it out not in metal but in porcelain. And you notice that at the bottom of it you see this Buddhist lapid arrangement going around with all the different symbols in it, and that is basically the same design you see in 18th century Qianlong moon flasks. So it was carried forward and put on the faces and fronts and backs of moon flasks, and you have this very lovely, very classical Ming lotus vine decoration and so forth. So it was a beautiful example, and it ended up selling, as I said, for a little over $200,000, $240,000, something like that, $230,000. Beautiful example, and it sold in the upper end of its estimate. Okay, these are including the buyer's premiums. All right, now. This plate didn't sell. This was that the pomegranate dish, pomegranate flower dish. They gave it a big write-up in the catalog. They gave you all kinds of information. They showed comps. They did everything they could to get this thing out and sold and launched, and it just didn't get there. Who knows why? It may have been the estimate was a little bit stiff for what it is. It's very possible. They didn't, this is estimate on request, so you'd have to call. So you don't know where the seller had put the estimate, and it may have just been a case where he got a little too far over his skis and demanded a higher estimate than was advisable. But at any rate, estimates are set, as you know, with a little negotiation with the seller. And then the auction house, of course, have to decide if they think it'll sell at that point and then make their argument why it will do fine at that price or maybe raise it or lower it. But in general, if the consignor gets too much control over the consignment process, they'll kill their own items by just getting too greedy on reserves and estimates. And a lot of people aren't very good auction sellers, so they don't have the stomach for it. They're good at buying at auctions, but they hate selling at them sometimes. All right, and if that's the case, go to a good dealer, have them sell it for you, and they'll take a commission for you. All right, and then on to this, the big Kangxi vase. Very, very pretty vase, nice colors on it, good shape and so forth. A little bit unusual shape up here in the shoulder, the way it sweeps in, but a very nice, very quick transition to a darker red, and then lighter coming down, and then a couple of areas where it pulled through, and then you have this very nice white foot rim at the bottom. There it is. Very typical of these examples. You often see this area where the red glaze stops. You have this little white patch, and then steps underneath to a neatly trimmed foot, so it'll fit well into a stand and look nice. All right, and it sold for 1.5 million Hong Kong, or just a little under $200,000, a bit under $170,000, which is a pretty good price for that. Okay, and this was a nice size vase too. Yeah, it was 17 inches tall, which is pretty good for that. That's a good nice vase. And then on to this, a very rare bird. This is it's a Yongchen period, water pot. There was a pair of these that came through a few years ago. There's one in the Palace Museum, but these are extremely rare. There's only a few of them known. Okay, and it's very small. All right, this little piece is only 2¼ inches tall. Ended up selling for 1.5 million Hong Kong, the same price as the previous lot, the big Kangxi vase. It is Marchant period though, and again, about $175,000 for it, but it was in nice condition. The enamels on it weren't worn too much. There was a couple of minor spots, but not bad. And it sort of went in the low end of its estimate. Again, had a pretty strong upper estimate on there. And then on to this really, really fabulous incise decorated celadon vase. Beautiful deep carving. Really, really nice deep carving on it all the way up in this beautiful, beautiful neck. And notice how the glaze pulls back a little bit on the high points, and it makes it turn white, so it gives it a very strong cameo effect. But just a superb looking pot. Just absolutely beautiful. And how did it do? It did very well. Oh, but it's Qianlong Marchant period. I should have mentioned that. I think most of you knew that just by looking at it. But a nice Qianlong Marchant period piece. It had an impressed mark on the bottom. There it is, stamped into the base right there. Very neat, very tidy, nice color green, and so forth. And it ended up selling for, on the upper end of its estimate, sort of at 4.4 million Hong Kong. So around $520,000, $530,000, somewhere in there. But an absolutely splendid example, and it was big. Yeah, it was 19 inches tall, big pot, big vase, but very impressive, very impressive. And then on to this. This was interesting. I like to track and see how furniture is doing, because furniture sort of has a life on its own, away from, of course, ceramics. It's an entirely different thing, has a different collector market. And this was an interesting piece. I looked at it before the sale because it's a piece of vernacular furniture. This is not formal Ming furniture or anything. This is more of a country piece, as they say in the trade. Not heavily, not terribly refined in the finish. The carving is sort of perfunctory, but nice looking. Has a good presence, and the proportions of it are very, very good. I believe there's a picture of the top of it. Yeah, there is here. blow this up. This is the top of it. Often when they frame these, then they put a floating board in the middle. And as you can see by this one, over time, as it aged and so forth, some cracks began to appear as the boards shrank. And often the tops of these is not quite of the same type of wood. This one has, I believe, this is Zeton wood, pretty sure. And this is a Wumu flush cornered. They call these Wumu flush cornered tables, and they dated this as 19th century. Okay, and this is what's so very interesting about it is that it brought 4.2 million Hong Kong, which is a very strong price for that. It was estimated at 600,000 to 700,000, which sounded, sort of about right when they gave it. But the interest in furniture is very, very strong. A lot of the other Ming furniture in the sales did really well too. There were a pair of big cabinets that did very well. There's another table we're going to look at that did very well. So there's some true vibrancy in the furniture market, and it may be because there's a lot of strong foreign interest as well as mainland Chinese interest in it. But for a piece of vernacular furniture, for a country piece, this is a very strong strong price. And it is made from Hong Huali and a Wumu flush corner leg. They call it a Wumu flush corner leg side table. And the top is made of Wumu wood. I thought it might have been Zetan. I just read it. I wasn't sure. But for a 19th century table, that's a strong price. And then on to this, that really unusual fishnet pattern Peking glass vase. Just an absolutely interesting thing. A very unusual pattern, overlaid, something that would have probably been done in the Imperial atelier. Just a really great example. Sold for 18th century, of course, and 375,000 Hong Kong, or a little over $40,000 for it. And it was small, 8 inches tall. Very, very nice, but unusual pattern. The patterning almost looks a lot like this kind of thing you see on Japanese ceramics when they use fishnet patterns. All right, and then over here to the next sale, which was Buddhist art under Empire. They had some splendid bronzes in here, just really great stuff. We'll go through just a few of them, and then we'll hop over to Sotheby's. But this was the record breaker of the day. It brought just about $1 million. Was this fabulous looking Xuande marked Shakyamuni. That's a tongue twister for me always. Bronze. It's about 10 inches tall, but just great quality. And if you blow it up and take a good look at it, the most striking part about it is it has this very strong symmetrical appearance to it. The construct of the face, the eyes, everything is very, very spaced, very proportional, almost squared, just lovely. And then of course the treatment of the robes is very, very, very fine on this. We'll bring it in nice and close, and you see how the folds are all worked in beautifully. The hands are nicely detailed, even with the cuticles and so on and so forth. And then the folds, the linen folds sort of up here of the robes over the shoulder, and one thing and another, and then down here on the base. And as I've mentioned this before, is a lot of fakes of these are on the market. Auction houses all over the U.S. have them all the time. We've talked about them, in the East, the West, the South, they turn up. And one of the things that they always seem to mess up on these is that these relief work beads, and I've mentioned this before, and I'm going to mention it again because I get people send me pictures all the time on the identification assistance service we offer, and they send me them to see if they're real or not. And the first thing I look at are these beads, and you'll notice that the wear on the edges of the beads is very irregular. It's like almost every one of them is a little bit different than the other. And on the copies, the biggest giveaway is that all of these, I shouldn't say it probably, but anyway, the biggest giveaway right away is that all of the wear on all of the beads is nearly identical from bead to bead to bead to bead, which isn't possible on an authentic piece because they all had different areas of wear, and it should look more natural. Okay, but on this one you can obviously see that's the truth. These like fingerprints, every one of them is different, and this was a beautiful example, and it ended up doing just great. It brought $1 million for a 10-inch bronze, and sold for almost 40%, 30% above its high estimate. Very strong price. And this was another thing that blew away its estimate as well. It was this really great copper red glazed monk's cap ewer. It comes from an earlier form of Buddhist ceremonial ewers that were typically done first in metalwork rather, and then they moved on and began producing them in porcelain during the late Yuan, early Ming dynasty, at any rate. But this is it. And this is a great example. And there are very few of these. This is a Qianlong piece. There are very few of these around in copper red and in copper red in this quality. They made some that were bigger. They made some that were slightly smaller. They're in the Palace Museum, as many of you know. There was one in the Chow collection. At any rate, this was estimated at 1.2 to 1.8 million Hong Kong. Okay, so they sort of had a high estimate on it of about $250,000, something like that. Ended up selling for over $1 million. All right, that's a pretty big jump, and the reason is, I suspect, is just because these things are so rare, and this was such a fine example. And I think that maybe they gave it an encouraging estimate on this, because I thought the estimate was low when I looked at it. It seemed to me that these should have been at least 5 to, well, or should have been 2 to 3, 2 to 4 million Hong Kong. But at any rate, it did great, and it was a beautiful, beautiful example. All right, and then we pop over here to this. This is the last lot. It caught my eye. I had looked at it in the preview. This is a big bronze. This was like 31 inches tall, and it was one of these 19th century late Qing dynasty Kuan Yin figures. She's very elegantly done. A lot of the facial aspects of this is very much like Tang Dynasty figures. Very classical, very strong face, very strong shoulders and arms, and she's carrying, and it's silver inlaid, and she's carrying a ruyi scepter, and then you have these sort of fatty-looking feet down here. And if you've seen Tang pottery figures of court ladies, they always have these sort of plump feet, and it became sort of a thing from then on. And just an elegant bronze, though, just absolutely elegant. And again, the folds of the robes were beautifully done, and lovely face. And very detailed hair knot on top. Beautifully done. And it ended up selling for over its high estimate of 550,000 Hong Kong, and it went for 750,000 Hong Kong, which is around $90,000. It was also inscribed, though, with the Yutang Shisu mark, 4 characters on the bottom, and incised marks and accurate marks always drive up the price. So you're looking, it came in at about 90,000, which was fine. It was quite a thing. And then we're going to hop over here now to the Sotheby sales. All righty, there were a number of Sotheby's had more to sell. This is a bigger area of listings, and some of the things that didn't sell were kind of surprising, including this cover lot. And we're going to get on to that, and I have no idea why. I have no idea. I couldn't think of any reason why it wouldn't sell, and. We're going to start here with important Chinese art. There's some fabulous things in here, and there were some things that didn't sell, which was interesting. One of them was this flambe glazed vase. If you looked at it pre-auction, I was kind of surprised by that. I thought it would sell. It was very much like the one that came out of that collection of furniture that was done in the Philippines a few years ago that went through the roof. And this one never got off the ground. One of the things I wanted to point out, and I didn't add it, so I'm going to add it now, is this very, very nice famille rose vase, Kangxi period, that had these beautiful, beautiful underglazed red flowers with overglazed green enamels punctuating it. It went over its estimate, but a very, very rare form. And these were made in a variety of types, and usually the biggest difference is where the flower is placed, where the big flower is on the left or on the right. But nice, even glaze, superbly glazed and superbly shaped. Very, very delicate piece. And as you know, these are not particularly big either. This one comes in at, around 3 inches or something, 3¼ inches. And it is Marchant period, though, on the bottom. And it sold for 1.875 Hong Kong, which is in the upper end of its estimate. Did just fine. Beautiful example. And recycle that one. There we go. And then onto this was that fabulous looking Yongshen, a very simply decorated Yongshen Marchant period vase with this notice that there's very limited borders. It just has this very simple ruyi head arrangement around the shoulder and this slight wave with little dots through the middle and this very nice looking garlic mouth. Very nice vase, very simple. I think what really sold this was the just pure elegance of it, the pure subtleness of it. And it was very small. What was it? 4 inches tall. And it ended up selling for 4.7 million Hong Kong, which was a little over $500,000, well above its high estimate of 3.5 million. And for a 4-inch vase, that's a very good price. That's quite a price. And then onto this was that really unusual Yongchen Marchant period, the fish in the pond cup. That we talked about it before the sale. I just thought it was lovely, beautifully done, and again very small. How big was this thing? 1 3/4 inches tall. So tiny little cup, but Marchant period. Nicely drawn, delicately drawn all the way around. I love the fish. I love how this fish, they put the eyeball toward the back. He's watching the other little carp or fish coming up behind him. And the way they depicted the seagrass, very lightly done. Nice sensitivity, going from light to dark to make the image more successful in the cobalt use. And it sold for 2.8 million Hong Kong, which is around $350,000 in U.S. currency. And then moseying along over to this was one of my favorite things in the sale. And we talked about it in the preview, about the winged dragon jarlet, Qianlong period, Ming, just absolutely lovely. And again, another small piece. You know, the interesting part is that all these pieces that you're seeing, all these small pieces would fit in a shoebox. That's how big they are. And they just are of fantastic interest among collectors. And here it is right here. And this thing was 3.5 inches in height, probably 4 inches wide, something like that. Very small, beautifully done, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful glaze. Here's the bottom of it, and I love the fact that they include the bases on these. If you want to see what a Marchant period Qianlong example looks like in this form and a jarlet, you can come and study it and see how the foot is done. And notice how white the paste is, just beautifully, beautifully refined white paste that they were able to do at that time. And at any rate, it did great. It brought 33,775,000 Hong Kong. All right, so that's a little over $4 million US. All right, for the nice little jarlet. That was one of the big sales of the entire series. Other than for paintings, the Chinese paintings did unbelievably well, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on them. But if you're interested in Chinese paintings, the 20th century painting market is unbelievably strong still. It's getting a little selective here and there, but the major artists, the major pieces, the known pieces, the pieces that have been exhibited are drawing an awful lot of interest. And earlier things are selling well. There was Sotheby's had a sale. I believe Sotheby's had a sale with a whole series of fan paintings, and a number of them just blew the estimates to pieces. And these are classical paintings, and that market seems to be coming along nicely. And then here we have that monk's cap cloisonné Ewer. I talked quite a bit about this. I thought this thing was great. Now, it had a big estimate, 20 to 30 million Hong Kong, which is, $2.5 to $3 million, but very rare form, unbelievably rare. Fantastically rare. And this was in beautiful, beautiful condition, and I have no idea why it didn't sell. It may have sold post-auction in a negotiated sale, just so that some of you out there that like to buy, always keep post-sale purchases in mind. I've gotten some of the best buys I've ever gotten from auction houses after the sale on a lot that didn't sell, because sometimes it's consigned by a family, it's settling an estate, and they're sort of up against the wall. They got to close the estate out. And even though it may seem like maybe it's worth a lot, it seems like a lot of money, maybe thousands and thousands of dollars. If it's an enormous estate, to them that's a drop in the bucket, and sometimes you can negotiate yourself a great post-sale price. So always be sure to call in if something doesn't sell that you liked, and see if you can engage them on taking an offer, and feel them out. They'll tell you what they think the buyer will take, and then you can make an offer against that or accept it. But it's a good strategy for buying good things. It's a very good strategy. And at any rate, I have no idea why this didn't sell. It's just strange. It may turn up again, or it may sell privately post-sale. I don't think the estimate or anything was crazy on it. It was an absolutely great example. And then on to this. This is that that fabulous painting of the dog that was done by a student of Giuseppe Castiglione. Classical, style. This was how he painted, and he had a number of students that he taught to paint in this manner. Very, very detailed. Loved the dog's eyes, those big brown eyes. God, he's a beautiful dog. And the way the fur is done, just a happy, healthy dog with his tail up in a very nice setting, and these very delicately flowers sprinkled around his feet. And this did great, actually. It did just fine. It brought 1.5 million Hong Kong, just about almost doubling its high estimate, or bringing in, around $170,000, $180,000. But what a great painting of a dog! If you love dogs, that was a good painting to buy. I love dogs. And then over here to the Marchant sale. This is, I think, the third or fourth sale that the Marchant family has done. The Marchants, a lot of you know who they are. They're very important long-term dealers in London. They have great stuff. They have a long history. They're in about their third generation. They've started a section. I think one of the daughters now is doing things with export porcelain, but they have access to some of the best stuff that's ever been on the market, and they also own a lot of great things, and I think they're whittling down parts of their collections and whatnot, but they've taken to selling at auction, and it's been, I think, a pretty good strategy, and it doesn't hurt that the stuff is fabulous, and it doesn't hurt at all that it's coming from them, because they make pretty good provenance, that family, and all of the things did really, really well, pretty much. I think this sale was about 90%, 95% sold. And I think they listened very carefully to what the Sotheby's folks had to give them advice on for estimates. And they were all very wise about it, and they created themselves a lot of interest. And one of the pieces was this beautiful coral ground famille rose bowl, Qianlong Marchant period, ended up selling for $1.75 million, or roughly, what does that come out to, around a little over 200,000. Beautiful, beautiful bowl. And then onto this, they had this absolutely fantastic garlic mouth Qianlong Marchant period vase with pomegranates going up the sides and flowers. And as I mentioned last week, the tradition was that when they were doing flower arranging around the Imperial Palace, they would match up the flowers that were depicted on the vase with the real thing to put inside the vase, so it would be continuous. It would have a good look of continuity to it. And this sold for, including everything all in, at 3.5 million Hong Kong, which was smack in the middle of the estimate range given. Okay, which is exactly what an auction house likes to see. And then it means they're doing their jobs. And then on to this. This, I think, was a wonderful dish, a very unusual dish, Yongchen Marchant period, very similar to the Kangxi examples, as we talked a couple of weeks ago about it. When people, at a glance, if you looked at this, you'd say, well, it's a Kangxi piece. And no, it's not. It's Yongchen Marchant period, which I think makes it rarer and more interesting. And I love the fact that the expression of the dragon's face, he's sort of smiling like he's happy he's about to grab the pearl or something. It's just wonderful. And I like the green clouds and all the other decoration. I love the running dragons around the rim. At a glance, the first time you look at this, you don't really notice it's them, but it is running dragons going around the rim, and sold for 875,000 Hong Kong, or about $100,000. I think that was a very good thing to buy. I think it was striking. This wasn't a huge plate either. It wasn't a charger. It was, what was it, 7 inches in diameter. Not very big, but very unusual. And then on to this, the Narcissus bowl, done like these early, well, they used to call, they're all sung, now they're finding out that they were probably made a bit later and even heading into the Yuan period. But this very nice tea dust glaze Narcissus bowl, just a beautiful, beautiful example, just a gem all the way around on every issue. I love how the glaze pulls back and highlights the brown areas underneath and so forth. And it ended up doing 1.5 million Hong Kong, or $170,000 or so, but a splendid example, just a splendid, and it was Marchant period. And then sliding along over to this, we mentioned it in last week's video. We're going to mention it again. This was that very, very rare race, and it was attributed to Tang Jin Tang, who was an enameler in Canton that was given a position at the Imperial atelier at the palace to come in and decorate. And if you look at the work and the shading and the quality of it and so forth, you can see why. Just and here she's got the dream cloud with the pavilion on top coming out of it and floating in the air. Sold for 6.4 million Hong Kong, and more than almost 5.5 times its high estimate. Just blew away the estimate. And again, this is a small pot. It's 8 3/4 inches tall. Beautifully, beautifully done. And then on to this, the Kangxi dish. This is a very well-known pattern, this type of plate, these Kangxi Dragon and Phoenix dishes. We actually sold one a few years ago. It wasn't quite as good as this one, though, because it had part of the rim was ground down. And this one brought the world. And part of the reason, it went over $100,000. And the reason is that, one, the colors on it were so crisp and beautiful. There was no wear on it. And the rim wasn't ground or worn at all. Whenever you see these, always in this pattern, for some reason, check the rims for wear. Check the rims to see if the glaze hasn't come off, because it happened fairly often with these for some reason, and they weren't discarded. They were just sold with sort of unglazed rims on them. And this one ended up selling for 1.3 million Hong Kong, or about $150,000. When the rim is ground, they sell for about a third of that. All right, but this was a particularly nice example. Very, very nicely decorated. Loved it. And then on to this, the Harry Gardner reticulated vase. It did fine. It ended up selling for 70 million Hong Kong, or about $8 million. Very, very rare bird. Very, very good provenance, history of ownership at Sir Harry Gardner. And you've all looked at it. Sotheby's did a very nice video on this with Nicholas Chow, so you can go through and look at that. We featured it on the newsletter page over on our website for everybody a few weeks ago. If you get the newsletter page, you remember it and you go back and find it again if you want to look again. But this was just a great example of these cage work pieces that are extremely rare. And as I said, it did fine, about $9 million roughly. All right, and now over to the monochrome section. This was that fun auction, sort of an oddball catalog, the way they had it laid out, where half the table would show up on one page and the other half would show up on another, and so on and so forth. But very nice stuff, and everything did just fine. One of them was this great big, Long Quan Celadon Mei Ping, early Ming period. They don't know exactly when. I don't think they even tried to guess, but Xuande, Yongle, somewhere in there. 15 inches tall, though. Big vase, and very, very nicely constructed. Notice the very small vase, and this waist coming up and going up into this great big swollen shoulder, and then tapering back into an inward moving mouth. But a really nice color. The color on this vase is what I'm sure is what really sold it, and it looks like it has a very, very faint crackle in it on top of it. Just a great piece. And let's see here. It sold for 7.3 million Hong Kong, or roughly, what does that come out to? About $900,000. Very good. And it's all a lot of money, isn't it? Amazing how they just million here, million there. It adds up to real money. And then on to this ebony inset painting table, Huang Chao, 18th century. This is not a Ming table, but a really, really fine table. It sold for 7.9 million Hong Kong, or just around $1 million, just a hair under $1 million. But beautiful, beautiful proportions. Just really great proportions on this. Very elegant, very clean. Almost looks modern. This almost looks like modernist Danish furniture, the way they were able to do it then. But this was done obviously in the 18th century. Has these nice gently inwardly turned feet, and they changed the color of the woods for the reticulated areas here to set it off. I mean, it really did set it off nicely. And as I said, it sold for almost $1 million, just about a little over 3 times its high estimate. And again, furniture seems to be very strong. Top quality furniture, not the average stuff, but the really good 18th century and back to the late Ming, high late Ming period material. And as we saw, our vernacular table did great, which is unusual. All right, now on to this super duper Western Zhao Dynasty bronze ritual pot, tapir ritual vase, and there it is. Nice patina on it though. Good patina, undisturbed. Lots of blotchy areas on it. Love the rabbit's heads on the returns here on the handles. Very interesting. Love those rabbit's heads. Reminds me of the rabbit's heads that were in the famous Qianlong fountain. You know, the famous fountain at the Ming Yuan. That there were all those fights over about the heads off the fountains. Very much done the same way. Any rate, beautiful example. Nice surface all the way around, and it did just fine. It brought 6.175 million. Or about 8 times its high estimate. Strong market for classical bronzes still. But I love the rabbits here, and also I meant to mention, there's another one right there, the big ears. Isn't that cute? All right, now let's head over to here. I mentioned this in last week's video because this was my favorite monochrome in all the sales, and maybe of all the porcelains. This was my absolute favorite because I just loved this 4 rams tea dust glazed vase because the color of this was just so absolutely amazing, absolutely perfect. The way it was applied, and the tone of the color is just incredibly successful, very warm, very inviting, very fine. There's nothing not to like about this pot, and it did great. It brought 4.9 million Hong Kong, which is about 550,000 dollars. Beautiful piece. And then over here to the Qianlong period rooster or chicken cups, and as you know, these were based on this one was done in jade, but it was based on the famous Qianhua chicken cup that was done in porcelain that sold at auction a number of years ago. There were very few of them in the world, as a handful, that sold for about over $35 million US. And the Qianlong emperor liked it so much he had one carved in jade, and this is it. All right, beautiful example. And again, the very tiny, what is this thing? 3 inches, little 3-inch cup in jade, and ended up selling for $12,175,000, or roughly 1.5 million for a little tiny jade cup. And I don't know that, but that might be a record for Qianlong jade wine cups done in with Marchant period. I suspect it is. Maybe not. Well, somebody will let me know. And the last thing I wanted to talk about very quickly were the paintings. Just give a couple of examples. You can go over and look at it. The classical Chinese paintings were up and down. Very hard to figure out what people are looking at these days, because some of them did great and some of them didn't. But this was one of the paintings I had mentioned a couple of weeks ago that was my favorite in the sale, just because I love the style of it. I love the little boys playing at the fountain with the model boats and so forth. And here's another little boy up here hiding. There's a lot to look at in this painting, and he's looking into the lotus tank with the dragons in cobalt blue, and then this very lovely balustrade behind it. And this is the taste of this painting is very much in the sense of Sung Dynasty paintings, but was done in the Ming Dynasty, and it was unsigned, anonymous painter. But how did it do? It did great. It brought 325,000 Hong Kong, which was around $40,000, I guess, somewhere in there, with a $30,000 to $50,000 Hong Kong estimate on it, which I thought was awfully reasonable, and apparently so did everybody else. And so it goes. All right. Again, keep the estimates reasonable. You might surprise yourself. And the other thing I wanted to mention was this painting in the sale. There was some controversy about this painting because previously it had been attributed to Su Han Chen. And Su Han Chen, you may not know who he was, but you know his painting, one of his paintings or two of his paintings anyway. They're very famous. And he was a Sung Dynasty painter. He was much adored by the court. And you've all seen this painting before, I think. All right, the kids over the table, and he had a particularly good eye. He was particularly sensitive with drawing children and colors and this kind of thing. And he also did this other one here with the kids and the cat. And he was particularly gifted with doing children because you could display their innocence, the sort of angelic faces of little kids. And here they are out playing. She's got her banner. with a feather, with a peacock feather on the end of it, and a little boy with her, and she's the adoring look cast down on this very cute cat. Is tough to paint, and she nailed it. But anyway, this painting for a long time was attributed to him, which would have made it extremely rare. And they sort of decided it wasn't. And they estimated it 20 to 30,000 Hong Kong, which is very reasonable, a couple of $3,000, $3,000 to $4,000, something like that. Ended up selling for $750,000 Hong Kong, so about 24 times its high estimate, because I suspect there are a number of people that don't agree with the change in attribution. I have a suspicion. And this painting, it's hard to compare to the other ones. It has certain elements that are very similar to the two we just looked at, the way that the hair is done, the tufts of hair and so forth. I don't know. The faces of this woman doesn't look quite as good as the way the faces were done on the other piece. But it has a lot of wear. This painting was not in tip-top shape. Here, there's paint missing all over it, and regardless, it ended up selling for a lot more than they had thought it was worth, nearly $100,000. So maybe somebody's taken a shot at it. Who knows? But anyway, it was still a lovely painting. But I actually like the Ming one better. I like this one better. I just think it's a better picture. All right, and that's it for all the sales. And if you haven't subscribed to us yet here on YouTube, please do. And if you haven't joined us over at Bidamount.com and use the site to look up things and check out the weekly newsletter page, which you can subscribe to for free, or if you're thinking of trying out the global member pages, please do. You can try it for a few months. If you don't like it, you don't have to keep it. But we've picked up a lot of hundreds of subscribers at this point, and we get a lot of positive feedback about it, which is very, very nice. And thank you all for doing that. Have a wonderful rest of your week. We'll be back Friday with the regular video, and we updated the global pages yesterday, and so on and so forth. Things go on, and we're getting back to normal slowly. All right. Have a great week. Bye-bye.